Okay, so here are 5 lessons from the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad that absolutely changed my life and may just change yours too. The book shares some really important concepts about how to make money, think about money, and create more money. Now, this is without doubt one of the personal finance greats written by Robert Kiyosaki, who has a net worth as of today of $100 million. So he certainly knows a thing or two about how to make money that we should probably know too. Lesson number 1, the rich don't work for money. Now, to be clear, there are 2 different facets to this. First, the action of being rich, and second, the mindset of being rich. Of course, in order to be rich, you need to be able to work in order to obtain that money. It's not just going to appear out of thin air unless you win the lottery or you inherit big. There is, in my opinion anyway, always an element of work that needs to take place to acquire anything of value in life altogether. However, the action of how you obtain that money is the key point that Kiyosaki makes. He talks about how his poor dad was a highly educated government employee, yet struggling financially. He said that his poor dad advocated playing it safe, working hard for the money, and avoiding debt. Whereas his rich dad, on the other hand, was an entrepreneur who was really financially successful. Rich dad focused on the importance of financial literacy, taking calculated risks, and building assets. One action gives you a middle class life and the other action gives you the potential to live a rich life. Kiyosaki says the poor and the middle class work for money, the rich have money work for them. It's essentially the difference between what we call active income versus passive income. An active income is where you go to a job at a specific time and place and you trade your time for money. Whereas passive income, on the other hand, is where you invest in income producing assets or capital generating assets that don't require any active work. This is one of the basic concepts within the book, which certainly challenged how I thought about money and life. And to be honest, I think some of those middle class principles, if you like, still very much sit within my subconscious mind. I'm kind of at a halfway house where I've got certainly my active income from my 9 to 5 job, but then on the flip side, I kind of tap into that business mind from creating YouTube videos on this YouTube channel, which admittedly is a little bit more active income, or at least at the start. But then once those videos are produced, they make money over and over again every single day thereafter, which you could certainly define as being a little bit more passive. And of course, I'm nowhere near rich, so I really need to focus on increasing my passive income moving forwards. Lesson number 2, your mindset determines your financial future. Kiyosaki believes that having a rich mindset is absolutely critical to your financial success. The single most powerful asset we all have is our mind. If it's trained well, it can create an enormous amount of wealth in what seems to be an instant. Different people think in different ways. I guess it largely depends on your upbringing and your environment on how you think about money. And because of that, we almost have 2 modes within our brain. We have both the restrictive and the expansive side. In the book it says, by telling yourself you can't afford something, it shuts down the brain. Your brain doesn't have to think about anything more at the end of the full stop of that sentence. And because of that, it restricts your mind to thinking about new possibilities. Whereas on the flip side, asking yourself, how can I afford something, opens up the brain to a different line of questioning. It forces the brain to think and search for answers. Kiyosaki says it opens up possibilities, excitement, dreams, and creates a stronger mind and a dynamic spirit. It's unlocking that expansive, creative part of the brain that we all need to tap into. Tony Robbins once said, the quality of your life is determined by the quality of the questions that you ask. So start challenging yourself to think more in an expansive way. And instead of telling yourself that I can't, start thinking about how can I. Lesson number 3, the rich pay themselves first, but the poor pay everyone else first. The term pay yourself first actually comes from this book called The Richest Man in Babylon. But Kiyosaki presents it in a slightly different way, where a picture paints 1,000 words. So take a look at this. Here are the financial statements of Poor Dad, who is someone who pays everyone else first. Now what's important to note here is the flow of money. Poor Dad has a job that pays a salary, which is used on expenses, and then liabilities, with nothing left over at the end. All the money that he gets, Poor Dad gives away to other people and businesses through his expenses. It's a good old-fashioned case of spending what you earn and having nothing left at the end of the month. It's that paycheck to paycheck lifestyle, which Willis Towers Watson did a study which actually showed that 36% of people here in the UK are currently in that position. And in America, it's even worse. A study that was done by Lending Club actually found that that number was nearly double at 63%. So how do you flip the script and stop living from paycheck to paycheck? Well, here's what the financial statements of Rich Dad look like, which is someone who pays themselves first. Rich Dad gets his salary, he then increases his assets through saving and investing first, followed by paying his expenses with what's left over. But what's important to note here is that with the action of putting money into assets, actually Rich Dad is able to top up his income through interest payments on savings, through dividends from investing into stocks, along with capital returns too. Essentially what you want to create is a circular motion where you turn your income into assets and your assets turn into more income. The goal is to get that wheel turning, and the more that it turns, the quicker it goes, and the more money that you're able to make. And that's the formula for how rich people get ahead in life whilst everybody else struggles financially. It's something that I've really focused on over the past few years, from investing heavily into my investment portfolio, which you can find videos on over on this channel, along with making sure that I'm saving diligently too. However, what I do think is important to say is that you don't need to be rich to get started, but you do need to get started in order to have the opportunity to become rich. Lesson number 4, take responsibility for your financial future. Kiyosaki believes that financial success ultimately comes down to personal responsibility and taking control of your own financial education and decision making. Yes, traditional education doesn't teach people how to manage money effectively, let alone how to actually generate any degree of wealth. So because of that, we need to take our financial IQ into our own hands. And the earlier that we can seek that education and implement the principles of good money management techniques, along with investing into assets too, the bigger results that you'll see over the course of your lifetime. Warren Buffett, admittedly the master of money management and investing, is probably the role model that we should all look to follow. So take a listen to this.
I'd started investing when I was 11, and I started reading about it when I was like 7. So I'd gone through I read every book in the Omaha Public Library that there was on, by the time I was 12, on investing and stock market. And I had a lot of fun.
How absolutely mental is that Warren Buffett started learning about investing at just 7 years of age, and then started actually investing into stocks at just 11 years of age. But inevitably, that interest in investing in the stock market and good money management has resulted in Warren Buffett having a net worth today of over $100 billion. But what's even more interesting is if we actually look at a timeline of Warren Buffett's net worth growth, he's actually produced over 99% of his net worth after the age of 50. You can see how his net worth has that exponential effect, where it took decades and decades to generate true wealth from continuously investing into assets. Now, if you do this yourself for somewhat long enough, and providing that you're successful in your endeavors, then your trajectory of your net worth should actually look quite similar. Yes, you might not end up with over $100 billion in net worth, but you should end up with a few million quid nonetheless. So as Kiyosaki says, start early and stay patient. Lesson number 5 is to invest in assets, not liabilities. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket, and a liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. Kiyosaki defines assets as something that generates income and increases in value, such as real estate and stocks. Here in the UK, our real estate increases at the value of about 5% per year. Add yourself a tenant to that property, and all of a sudden you've got a cash flowing asset too. The UK stock market, on the other hand, has increased in value by 98.5% in the past 20 years. Now, when you add dividends to the mix at an additional roughly about 3.5% per year on top of that, that gives you a compounded annual growth rate of about 7% per year. So you can see just by how investing into assets, achieving these kinds of rates of return, just how your money can grow in value over time. Whereas on the flip side, liabilities are things that require ongoing expenses, like cars and houses. Kiyosaki concludes that rich people acquire assets, and the poor and the middle class acquire liabilities that they think are assets. Now, this one will certainly be up for hot debate down in the comment section below, but Kiyosaki argues that residential property, i.e. the one that you live in, is certainly not an asset, despite the fact that most people that you speak to will argue that it is. And here are 3 reasons why. A residential property you pay for, with substantial interest. The capital gains are also relative to that of other properties. And the only way that you actually get the equity from the property is if you sell it and buy a cheaper one. And principally, that's not what creating wealth is. Let's compare that to a property that's sole purpose is just as an investment. You've got tenants paying rent, putting cash flow back in your your pocket. The value comes from tenants paying your mortgage, not you. And if you sell the house, you get to keep the proceeds minus some tax. So they are some fundamental differences that make all the difference when you're looking at your real wealth. And that might challenge some belief systems, because it certainly did mine, because it's just a completely different way of thinking about how money works. Because the reality is you're only becoming wealthier if your wealth is growing bigger and faster than other people. And residential property that you live in doesn't really allow you to achieve that. It's certainly something that I hadn't quite comprehended before, but be sure to let me know what your thoughts are down in the comment section below. But as Kiyosaki says, if people are prepared to be flexible, have an open mind, and learn, they do tend to get richer. And talking of learning, I also read another book called The Psychology of Money that was really powerful in terms of changing my mindset and how I think about money. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about that, then be sure to click on that video next. Be sure to subscribe to the channel on your way out. And with that being said, I'll see you over in the next one.